A crowded bus, a young black boy with a heart full of kindness, and a pregnant woman barely managing to stand. His selfless gesture to offer her his seat seems ordinary, until she hands him a note that changes everything. What could she possibly write that leaves him speechless and transforms his life forever? The answer will shock you. It was one of those brutally cold winter evenings, the kind where every breath feels like frost scraping your lungs. A crowded city bus rattled down the icy streets, packed with tired commuters desperate to get home. In the middle of it all was Elijah, a young black boy with a worn school backpack, clutching his books tightly as he balanced on the edge of his seat. His mother always told him, kindness is a currency the world never devalues. But tonight, kindness was the last thing on his mind. Across from him stood a pregnant woman, swaying with the jolts of the bus. Her face was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she held onto the pole for support. The other passengers avoided her gaze, too engrossed in their phones or their exhaustion to notice her struggle. Elijah couldn't help but watch, guilt twisting in his stomach. The boy hesitated, feeling the weight of his own fatigue after a long day at school. His seat was a rare comfort on the crowded bus, and yet, his mother's words echoed in his mind. With a deep breath, he stood up. "Ma'am, you can take my seat," he offered, his voice soft but clear. Her eyes widened in surprise, and a faint smile broke through her tired expression. "Thank you," she murmured, lowering herself into the seat with visible relief. Elijah grabbed a nearby pole to steady himself, trying to ignore the ache in his legs. He didn't expect anything more than a polite nod in return. But just as the bus approached the next stop, the woman reached into her bag and pulled out a small piece of paper. "Here," she said, pressing it into his hand. Her voice carried something more than gratitude. It was almost trembling, as though whatever was on the note carried a gravity Elijah couldn't yet understand. Confused, he opened the folded piece of paper as the bus doors hissed open. The note wasn't long, but its contents hit him like a thunderbolt. His hands trembled, his breath caught in his throat. Whatever it said wasn't just a thank you. It was something far more profound. Elijah stared out at the frosty streetlights as the bus moved on, his heart racing. He had no idea that this one moment of kindness would set off a chain of events that would forever alter his life. Elijah sat clutching the note, his mind racing as the bus rattled along the icy streets. The pregnant woman had exited at the last stop, disappearing into the frosty night. But the words on the paper burned into his memory, each letter a spark igniting questions he couldn't yet answer. The note read, "Thank you for your kindness. You'll understand why this matters soon." His young mind reeled. What could she mean? How could a simple act of giving up his seat carry such weight? Elijah looked around the bus, wondering if anyone else noticed the significance of what had just happened, but the passengers remained oblivious, absorbed in their own worlds. As the bus neared his stop, Elijah tucked the note carefully into his backpack, deciding to show it to his mother. If anyone could make sense of this strange message, it was her. The apartment was warm, a sharp contrast to the biting cold outside. His mother, a hard-working nurse with weary eyes but a kind smile, greeted him as she prepared a modest dinner. Elijah hesitated, the words from the note tumbling in his head like loose stones. Finally he spoke. "Mum, something weird happened on the bus today," he began, pulling the note from his backpack. Her brow furrowed as she read the words. For a moment she said nothing, her expression shifting between curiosity and concern. "Elijah," she said softly, "sometimes the smallest things we do ripple out in ways we can't imagine. Maybe this is one of those moments." Elijah nodded, though his heart still felt heavy with questions. He spent the rest of the evening trying to push the incident from his mind, but sleep didn't come easily. Every time he closed his eyes, he pictured the woman's trembling hands, her faint smile, and the way she'd looked at him, like she knew something he didn't. The next morning, The mystery deepened. As Elijah and his mother walked to his school, they noticed a sleek black car parked outside their building. A man in an expensive suit leaned casually against it, holding a folder. He spotted them immediately and approached. "Elijah Jackson?" the man asked, his voice calm yet authoritative. Elijah froze, clutching his mother's hand. "Yes?" The man smiled warmly, handing him the folder. "This is for you, from the woman on the bus last night." Elijah's mother looked at the man, then at her son, her face a mix of confusion and suspicion. "What's this about?" she asked. "All I can say," the man replied, "is that your son's kindness didn't go unnoticed. The answers are in there." And just like that, the man returned to the car and drove off, leaving Elijah and his mother standing on the icy sidewalk, the folder heavy in his hands. Back in their apartment, the weight of the mysterious folder pressed down on Elijah and his mother. They sat at the kitchen table, its surface worn but sturdy, much like their bond. Elijah's mother hesitated before opening it, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a thick stack of papers and a small card with the woman's name, Rachel Emerson. The first page was a letter. Elijah's mother read it aloud, her voice steady but full of emotion. "Dear Elijah, in the simplest of acts, you showed me kindness that I had forgotten existed. You couldn't have known, but last night your gesture wasn't just a seat, it was a lifeline. I've been searching for a reason to believe in humanity again, and you gave it to me. This folder contains my way of saying thank you." Elijah and his mother exchanged puzzled glances before delving deeper into the contents. The papers revealed Rachel Emerson as the CEO of a successful company that supported underprivileged youth. One of the documents was a fully funded scholarship in Elijah's name, covering his education all the way through college. Elijah's mother gasped. This can't be real," she murmured, scanning the details. But it was all there: signatures, contact numbers, and even a personal note of congratulations from Rachel. Elijah, still processing, whispered, She did all this because I gave her my seat." His mother wrapped her arms around him tightly. "Elijah, it's more than that. She saw who you are, a kind, selfless person. That's something money can't buy, and it's something the world needs more of." The impact of the gesture began to sink in, but the surprises weren't over. At the bottom of the folder was an invitation to an event later that week, a gala hosted by Rachel herself. It was an opportunity for Elijah to meet her in person and hear the rest of the story. The days leading up to the gala were filled with a whirlwind of emotions. Elijah's mother borrowed a neighbor's sewing machine to alter a second-hand suit for him, making sure he looked sharp. On the night of the event, Elijah stood in front of the mirror, nervous but excited. "You ready, kiddo?" his mother asked, her smile full of pride. Elijah nodded. "I think so." As they arrived at the grand venue, Elijah's eyes widened. The shimmering chandeliers, the polished marble floors, and the sea of well-dressed guests made him feel like he'd stepped into another world. A host escorted them to a reserved table at the front, where Rachel Emerson stood waiting. She smiled warmly as they approached. "Elijah," she said, extending her hand, "it's wonderful to meet you again." He shook her hand, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you. For everything." Rachel knelt slightly to meet his eyes. "No, Elijah. Thank you. What you did reminded me of something I'd forgotten. A little kindness can change the world." The moment was interrupted by applause as Rachel led Elijah to the stage, ready to share his story with the crowd. Elijah stood on the stage, the bright lights almost blinding, but the warmth of the applause gave him strength. Rachel introduced him to the crowd, her words carrying weight and emotion. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "this young man reminds us that the smallest gestures can make the biggest impact. Elijah's kindness on a crowded bus wasn't just a random act. It was a reminder of the humanity we all share. The audience leaned in, captivated by the story. Rachel handed the microphone to Elijah, who hesitated for a moment. His mother gave him a reassuring nod from their table, and he took a deep breath. "I didn't think what I did was a big deal," Elijah said, his voice steady but humble. "I just saw someone who needed a seat more than I did. I never imagined that it would lead to something like this." The crowd erupted into applause again, and Rachel took the microphone back, smiling. "Elijah's story is why we're here tonight. His selflessness inspired me to take action, and I want to announce something special. Starting today, the Emerson Foundation will establish a scholarship program in Elijah's name, supporting students who demonstrate kindness and a commitment to their communities." The room filled with cheers and applause, and Elijah's face lit up with a mix of pride and disbelief. His mother wiped away tears, overwhelmed by the moment. As the event continued, Elijah met numerous guests who congratulated him and shared their admiration. One older man, a retired teacher, patted him on the shoulder. "Son, you've done more than many adults ever will. Don't stop being the person you are." The evening was a whirlwind of emotions and connections. Elijah felt a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced before, as if the world had suddenly expanded with possibilities. Later, as the gala wound down, Rachel found Elijah and his mother. She handed Elijah an envelope. "This is for you, Elijah," she said. "It's a personal note and a little something to help you start your journey." At home that night, Elijah opened the envelope to find a letter from Rachel and a check for a substantial amount of money, a seed fund to pursue his dreams, whatever they may be. The note read, "Elijah, kindness is the most powerful currency we have, and you're already wealthy in it. This is just the beginning. Use it to follow your dreams and make the world a better place, just as you did for me." Rachel. Elijah's mother held the letter, her voice thick with emotion. "Elijah, do you see now? You have the power to change lives, not just yours, but others too." Elijah smiled. "I won't waste it, Mom. I promise." Months turned into years, and Elijah's life took a turn no one in his old neighborhood could have predicted. The scholarship named after him became a beacon of hope for countless students, especially those who felt overlooked or underestimated. Elijah was no longer just a boy from a crowded bus. He became a symbol of what kindness could achieve. With the support of Rachel and the Emerson Foundation, Elijah went on to pursue his education, focusing on community development and social justice. His journey wasn't easy, but he carried with him the lessons his mother had instilled and the life-changing moment on the bus that started it all. One day, Elijah stood in front of a packed auditorium at his university, delivering the commencement speech. He looked out at the sea of faces, some of them recipients of the very scholarship that bore his name. "Years ago," he began, "I was just a kid giving up his seat on a bus. I didn't think it was special, but what I learned is that every small act of kindness has the potential to ripple out into something greater than we can imagine. It's not about being recognized, it's about being human." The audience gave him a standing ovation, his words resonating deeply. Rachel, sitting in the front row, beamed with pride. She had watched Elijah grow from a selfless boy into a confident young man who was changing lives just as she had hoped. After the ceremony, Rachel approached him, handing him a framed photograph. It was the picture of him on the bus, the moment that had started it all. "I thought you might want this," she said with a warm smile. Elijah looked at the photograph, then back at Rachel. "Thank you for everything. You didn't just change my life, you gave me the chance to change others." Rachel placed a hand on his shoulder. "You earned this, Elijah. And the best part? You're just getting started." As Elijah walked away, the photo in his hand and the cheers of the crowd still ringing in his ears, he couldn't help but smile. The note Rachel had handed him all those years ago had set the stage for a life he never could have dreamed of. It was a simple truth that echoed in his heart. One act of kindness could indeed change the world.